Undercover boss buys a movie ticket, freezes when two girls say the staff are rude. That morning, the city air was damp after a long night of rain. Lazy beams of sunlight filtered through the roadside trees, lingering over the old, faded sign of Sunrise Theatre, very first branch. And once the proudest achievement of John, beneath a dark coat and a low-drawn baseball cap, no one recognized the man quietly crossing that narrow street. But it was John the man who had stood here 20 years ago with nothing but empty hands and a dream bigger than any cinema screen. From a small screening room that could barely seat a few dozen people, John had built an empire called Sunrise Theatre. To him, every film shown wasn't just entertainment. It had to be an emotional journey, a place where every guest was welcomed like an old friend. But then, as the inevitable cycle of growth continued, John had to hand over operational control to senior management. From then on, all he saw were financial reports printed on thick stock paper and revenue charts that steadily pointed upward. Everything seemed stable. Until recently, when complaints began to creep in like the first cold winds of winter, about declining service quality, about the forced, lifeless smiles of the staff, about how the theaterans, as warm as a second home, had become colder and more indifferent than ever. And though the reports stacked neatly on his desk still blazed the word stable in bright red letters, his heart could no longer rest easy. That day, without notice, without sending any warning to the management team, John dressed plainly, used a false name, and quietly blended into the crowd like any other customer. His destination was the place that had once been his greatest pride, the first Sunrise Theatre branch. It was there that he would find the answer himself. Did the dawn of sunrise still linger, or had it long faded under the weight of polished reports and soulless numbers? The waiting area was drowned in monotonous background music. The dim yellow lights seemed powerless to warm the cold, lifeless atmosphere. John stood quietly in the long line of people waiting to buy tickets, his eyes silently observing every indifferent expression on the employees' faces. His hand tightened around the sample ticket. He held the very design he had once cherished every line of when he created it. Just ahead of him, two young women, perhaps regulars, or maybe people who had once been part of the theater's glorious days, whispered to each other. One of them sighed softly, her voice tinged with nostalgia and disappointment. "The service here has gotten so bad, it's nothing like when the old owner used to run it. The staff is cold and curt. No one bothers to pay attention to customers anymore. I guess now they only care about making money." John froze. That sentence struck his heart like a sudden, painful blow, sharp and cold. The glass of water in his hand suddenly felt unbearably heavy. His eyes began to sting as the dim lights seemed to blur before him. In that moment, the years of hardship from his startup days flashed before him, like a slow-motion film those days when he personally wiped down every seat and greeted every guest with a smile, the dream of building a cinema that wasn't just a place to watch movies, but a place to preserve the happiest memories. Yet now, those memories remained only as sorrowful whispers among the line of people waiting to buy tickets. John swallowed hard, his throat dry. For the first time in many years, he felt so small amid the very empire he had built. And more than ever, he knew a real storm was coming, starting right here, where the dawn he had once dreamed of seemed all but extinguished. But John didn't stop at that visit. In the following days, he returned many more times quietly, anonymously at times no management report could ever record. Early in the morning, when staff began their shifts in silence, not even bothering to greet one another. At noon, when crowds poured in but the smiles behind the counters were nothing more than weary, forced curves. And late at night, when the neon lights in the hallways flickered uncertainly, either from burned-out bulbs or from the simple fact that no one cared enough to replace them. From behind the backstage doors, John witnessed firsthand how Garethi manager he had once trusted ran everything by cold, heartless numbers. Receipt paper? Get the cheapest. Popcorn? As long as it looks yellow, who cares about the buttery smell? Soda? Just add extra ice to fill the cup. Customers won't notice. These directives came out without hesitation, turning everything at Sunrise from cherished experiences into soulless products meant only to sell. The Stefanse young faces, full of energy now, kept their heads down, their eyes empty. Every word of protest meant a cut in hours, a glare from management, or worse, being scheduled during off-peak hours that wouldn't even cover rent. Product quality, that wonderfully fragrant popcorn of the past, was now cold, limp, hastily packed in crumpled paper bags. The soda was so diluted that if you held it up to the light, you could clearly see the floating ice. But the digital price board above still blazed on with the same high prices, bright and unchanging, as cold and unfeeling as the faces behind the counters. And then, the moment John would never forget, in the corner of the theater, the same memory corner he had personally set aside for his most loyal patrons, those two young women appeared once again. They slowly counted out every faded coin in their hands before quietly purchasing the smallest bag of popcorn so tiny that they had to keep their hands tightly around it just to hold in the remaining warmth. They sat down on a bench tucked away in a dark corner, far from the bright lights and noisy sounds. Their eyes gazed toward the large screen, as if longing to reclaim forgotten memories. Family movie nights filled with laughter, days when the smiles of the staff felt warmer than even the films on the screen. They didn't complain. They didn't voice any resentment. They simply sat there quietly, holding on to the last remaining fragments of cherished memories. John stood there, shrouded in the darkness, his heart tightening as if someone were physically squeezing it. Never before had he felt so small, so powerless. All the growing revenue figures, all those perfect reports he once took pride in now felt like nothing more than polished curtains hiding a bitter truth. Sunrise had lost its very soul. In that moment, John whispered to himself, his voice choked with emotion, "No, this sunrise cannot fade away like this. If there's even a glimmer of hope left, I will start again, right from this very moment." That night, even as the lights in the theater gradually went out, John remained. He stood still under the old awning, the very spot where he and his first team had taken their commemorative photo on opening day. The night breeze swept through broken window panes, and the faded poster of a once famous blockbuster gently swayed in the wind, as if it, too, felt the chill of disappointment. From his hidden corner, John saw Garetha Branch, manager, leaning against the ticket counter, a cigarette dangling from his lips, despite the bright "no smoking" sign right above his head. Gary spoke quietly to the warehouse supervisor, his tone dripping with contempt. "As long as they're still willing to buy tickets, we don't need to change a damn thing. It's profits that keep Sunrise alive, not some silly handshakes or warm greetings." In secret, John heard every word, each one cutting through him like a cold knife, striking directly at the ideals he had once fought so hard to build. Elsewhere, he saw young Amy, a new employee, barely a month into her job, being constantly shuffled between the ticket counter and the popcorn stand, without a single word of proper training. Her small hands trembled as she struggled to pack hot popcorn quickly, the customers impatient and the supervisor's watchful glares making every task unbearable. Every time she faltered, Gary would simply shake his head, his eyes filled with scorn. John clenched his fists, his knuckles turning pale. Cold sweat rolled down his temples, not from heat, but from the crushing realization that this place, this very foundation he had built with so much heart, had become nothing but soulless walls that crushed and wore down the smallest, most vulnerable lives. And then, amidst the hollow laughter of a few wealthy patrons, John saw them again, those two young women. They returned once more, their footsteps slow, their hands tightly clutching the few remaining coins in their pockets. When they received their tiny bag of popcorn, they still offered young Amy a genuine, gentle smile, a smile that carried warmth and understanding, as if to comfort her through the clumsiness and pressure she was enduring. They returned again to their familiar seat in the corner of the theater, where the dim lights only illuminated half their faces. But this time, John noticed something different. They hadn't just come to watch a movie. It was as if they were quietly witnessing the end of something or waiting for a new beginning. John turned away, his eyes welling up with tears. Never in his life had he felt time slow down like this. All the surrounding noise seemed to fade, leaving behind only the heavy sigh of his own conscience. He silently vowed to himself, "No, Sunrise will not die along with those lifeless numbers. It will live again, starting with these humble yet resilient people." And at that very moment, John pulled out his phone. His hands still trembled, but in his eyes blazed a determination fiercer than ever before. "Prepare an all-hands meeting, tomorrow morning. I want every senior executive present. And this time, we'll talk about people, not numbers." The atmosphere felt frozen. All staff had been urgently summoned. Anxious eyes exchanged silent glances, each person restless with worry. They had never seen such an abrupt meeting call before, and never had the air felt this heavy, this suffocating. At exactly 9 a.m., the glass doors swung open. John Malertha, founder of Sunrise Theatre, strode inside. Gone was the quiet man hidden under a faded baseball cap. He stood tall now, authoritative and commanding in a crisp, dark gray suit, his eyes sharp and unwavering. On his chest, the metallic name tag gleamed under the bright LED lights. John Miller, CEO and founder, Sunrise Theater Group. The whispers fell silent. Garethi Branch manager stood frozen, his face pale, sweat trailing down his temples. And there, in the front row, sat the two young women, Emma and Grace, their eyes wide with surprise and hope, as if waiting for something they had longed for but never dared to believe could happen. John stepped onto the stage. His voice rang out calm, yet piercing through the room like a blade cutting through the thick veil of falsehood. Sunrise Theater was built on genuine smiles and joyful memories. But today, I stand before you to face the disappointment I've allowed to happen, and I will not turn away from it another day. He gestured to the crew. The giant screen behind him lit up. The raw footage played out vividly before everyone's eyes. Gary nonchalantly accepted a thick envelope from a supplier, his eyes cold and calculating like ice. Exhausted employees quietly gathered bags of stale popcorn, their eyes lifeless and drained. Expired supplies were secretly hauled into the storage room behind closed doors. And then, a recording echoed through the room, each word cutting deep like a blade. Is the common fund full yet? If not, forget about getting the good shifts. The lights snapped off. In the suffocating silence, John turned, his eyes piercing straight through Gary. Gary, do you have anything to say before I sign your immediate dismissal right here and now? Gary stood frozen, his mouth opening, but no words came out. The entire room held its breath. John coldly drew out his pen and, without hesitation, signed the termination document right there at the podium. Cost-cutting is never an excuse to trample on human dignity. As of this moment, you are officially dismissed. And to those who enabled this corruption, make your choice. Walk out now, or stay and rebuild from the ground up with integrity. Some quietly hung their heads and left the room. But in the eyes of those who remained, a different light began to shine that Sunrise Theater hadn't seen in a long time. The light of hope. John stepped down from the podium, walking slowly into the crowd. He stopped in front of Emma and Grace. His voice softened, deep and heavy with emotion. Why do you two keep coming back, even though everything has changed? Emma lowered her head slightly, a bittersweet yet warm smile lighting her youthful face. Because we still hope that one day this place will feel warm again, just like the family movie nights we all used to dream about. A soft breeze swept through the hall. In that moment, John felt every beat of his heart strong, urgent, and resolute. He squeezed their hands, his eyes glistening yet unwavering. That day has come, and it will be you two who light that dawn again for Sunrise Theater. Right then and there, he personally handed Emma a badge joining the customer experience management team, making her the one to reignite the spirit of service and care that Sunrise had once proudly embodied. As for Grace, he handed her the honorary scholarship card, opening the door for her to join the internal management training program, a journey to become the cinema manager she had once only dared to dream of becoming. Applause echoed continuously, and this time it wasn't just for celebration. It was the sound of revival, the sound of a new beginning. And at that very moment, John knew with certainty the dawn he had always dreamed of had truly returned. Not just through the glittering lights of the signage, but through the people who dared to hope, dared to change, and dared to start again from the depths of their own hearts. That morning, Sunrise Theater didn't just welcome a new day, it welcomed a completely new chapter. Under the brilliant canopy of lights, the air was filled with laughter, warm greetings, and promises of a brighter future. Today wasn't merely a grand reopening. After restructuring, it was the day Sunrise was truly reborn. At the central stage, beneath the grand banner that read Theater Reborn, stood two young women, Emma Williams and Grace Miller. They no longer sat quietly in the dim corners of the theater as they once did. Now, they stood tall and proud in their formal uniforms. On their chests, their name badges sparkled under the stage lights. Emma Williams, Customer Experience Manager. Grace Miller, Operations Supervisor. Emma took a deep breath, her eyes sweeping across the auditorium where familiar and new faces alike waited in anticipation. Her voice rose steady, confident, no longer trembling like in the old days. There were days when we could only sit in the darkest corner, holding nothing but a small bag of popcorn and quiet memories. But even when the lights dimmed, we held on to one thing, hope. And today, we've not only found that light again, we will be the ones to ignite it. So that every day at Sunrise Theater, joy and kindness will once again shine brilliantly. Thunderous applause rolled through the hall like ocean waves. In the eyes of the staff gathered below, there was not only joy but pride. They knew that from today on, Sunrise wouldn't just be a place to work. It would be a place where people could rediscover their own sense of purpose and worth. On the rooftop, through the wide glass windows, John Miller stood quietly, his arms folded across his chest, his distant gaze overlooking the bustling lobby below. Laughter echoed through the corridors, the warm aroma of freshly popped buttered popcorn mingling with the rich scent of coffee, curling gently through the morning breeze. He closed his eyes softly, a gentle smile playing across his lips. A deep sense of peace welled up in his heart, a feeling he hadn't known in a long time. And as he opened his eyes, the morning sunlight streamed through the glass, casting a quiet, gentle glow across his face. John whispered, his voice gently rising amidst the sound of the wind. This is the dawn I once dreamed of. Down in the grand lobby, after the vibrant applause faded, the air suddenly grew still as the soft notes of a piano filled the space. A young staff member boy who once worked as a janitor at the theater now stepped onto the stage in a crisp white shirt, bowing slightly before the hall. I used to be the one who swept these hallways, he paused. Then his eyes brightened. But today, I stand here to perform the opening piece for the Theater Reborn program. Thank you to those who taught me to believe in my own worth. His hands swept gracefully across the piano keys. The melody echoed a familiar harmony that John had once heard in his early days as a young entrepreneur, quietly listening from backstage during those late-night screenings. Now, that tune played again, but with renewed life, awakening deep emotions in everyone present. John quietly left the window, walking slowly down toward the lobby. Each step seemed to shed the burdens of past years. As he entered the hall, the entire space fell silent for a moment, then erupted into thunderous, unending applause. Emma and Grace saw him and bowed respectfully, but in their eyes shone a proud, light like true companions on this journey. John stepped onto the stage, his eyes resting for a long moment on the corner of the theater, the very place where years ago he had sat quietly, dreaming that Sunrise would one day become a place where everyone could find happiness. Today, that corner was no longer empty, but filled with laughter, warm lights, and faces full of hope. He turned to the crowd, his voice carrying powerfully across the room without need for a microphone. There were days when we forgot where we started, but today I stand here not to speak of the past, but to affirm our future. A Sunrise, we will rebuild together a place where people don't just come to watch movies, but to rediscover emotions, to find joy, and to feel truly valued. Light flooded the auditorium. Outside, the sun had risen high, shining directly onto the brand new sign of Sunrise Theater. From the rooftop balcony, John stood quietly, looking out toward the horizon. The music still echoed behind him. Laughter continued to ring through the hall, and in that moment, he knew a new journey had truly begun. This isn't just the dawn I once dreamed of. John whispered once more, but this time, his eyes gleamed with unwavering conviction. This is the dawn we will protect together. And from that place, Sunrise's new journey truly flourished, not just through ticket sales or revenue charts, but within the hearts of every person who had and would continue to walk through those doors. You can build a grand empire, but if you forget the value of people, it's nothing but a castle built on sand. And a sustainable business is not built upon cold, dry numbers, but upon hearts that have been warmed, dreams that have been rekindled, and people who have found happiness again because of you. For in the end, the greatest legacy you can leave behind is not a vast fortune, but the lives you've touched through kindness and compassion.